Okay, so let's talk about class examples now. Now, in the form, most of the stuff looks similar, except that you'll see that the entire bit where the struct was, and you can see it here in the comments, is missing here. We've taken it out, and we can just, even remove these comments here, and all of this. And now you can see that from the form part to the form load, there's nothing there. So from a construction point of view, nothing of the contact is there, except where I've changed my contact name to my contact here. Now what I did was I created a my contact file, and when I did that, I went over here to the project name. This part is the project name, just under solution, and I right-clicked and I said add, and then over here under add is class, and that means we're going to add a class. Now I've already done that here where it says my contact, but I'm going to add my contact to, and I'll explain that a little bit later, except that for the moment, just ignore that. I'm just showing you that a class was created here, and when I created my contact, I added all of this stuff that was in the struct, but instead of creating contact, I created my contact to show you that it was a little bit different. Okay, but all of this stuff is the same, basically. First name, last name, etc., etc. The phone number stuff. I changed the comments a little bit here, but when we're talking about these, they're no longer called variables in object-oriented programming. We're calling them properties now. And you might think of something here when we're talking about properties. When we go to the design form and we are working on one of these items, remember that this is the properties window. These are items that we could call variables, except that these are objects in a class. These are components, rather, in a class that provide descriptions on how they look. For instance, this one has properties that describe the size of the item, width and height, and components have a very complicated view and so forth, but is largely hidden from us. We can just drag and drop them onto the form and they work. If you're wondering how I got this all the same, I did something that I know of how to do in programming, which is kind of an advanced feature. Okay, so my contact basically is the same thing. We have all of this: public string, first name, last name, etc., etc., the telephone number, even the function that was down here. And again, we've changed the name of this in terms of object-oriented programming. We no longer call it a function, we call it a method, but it's the same idea. There are slight differences in as much that anything that is a method here in object-oriented programming, we can override and alter the work that gets done inside in another class. I'll discuss this a little bit in a minute. This is our definition for the contact or my contact here. And again, I created this in a separate file that goes along with the project. Now when I say a separate file, keep in mind that if we look at the program, it is literally a separate file. There is a file here called my contact. Okay, so we need to keep in mind that it creates a separate piece, and it does this partially for management purposes, but it also creates it separate for another purpose, which I'll get into just a little bit. We go back to the main program, which is Form 1 in this case, and we can run this, and you can see it's a little bit smaller, and we can run this, and this looks just the same. And then we click submit. Potential error message again, that was that particular function, and I'll show you some things about that. And then the submit is finished. Okay, so it's really no different here in our example. The only thing we've really done is moved all of that code into My Contact, and so if we go to My Contact up here, you can see it's all there, and it makes it a little bit more manageable, but it also does something else, and we'll discuss this in just a second. Oh, and one other thing I want to point out, now this is called My Contact rather than Contact, and it references back to that file. Okay, so it says My Contact right there. Other than that, the rest of this is completely unchanged. It still says C dot because I had the variable called C here. And I could change that name to something else, but then I'd have to change all of these, and frankly, we don't need to waste the time on that. Okay, so why are classes a little bit better? Okay, so we created a My Contact 2. And at the moment, it has nothing in it. But I'm going to change this just slightly, and I'm going to say My Contact, and you can see it pops up there. Now, why am I doing that? I'm saying My Contact 2 inherits everything from My Contact. Okay, so that's all of this. Okay, so now if I go to Form 1 and I say I'm going to do a variable here, and I'm going to say that it is My Contact 2, and you'll see that because it inherits everything from My Contact, all of this still works. Now, why would this be of use? One of the things that we can do is we could potentially go here and say public string, and we'll create a variable. I'm just going to call it purity here. It doesn't really have to mean anything, and a semicolon. Now, why would we do that? Well, we can create any type of variable we want, but I'm just going to create a string here. Now, let's go back into the form, and because of this, I can go here and I can say C dot, and the variable name was purity, so I can start typing, and there's the variable purity. And I can say equals, we'll call this Bob, and semicolon. Now we're just assigning a string to the variable, and remember, purity was just a string. It's no big deal here. Okay? But keep in mind that C also had first name, last name, and everything else. Well, why did it do that? Because it inherited everything out of My Contact, plus we can add anything else we want to add here. Okay, this is a property, so we're adding a property called purity. It's kind of a useless name here, but I just wanted to show you that we're able to add any additional properties that we want. We are also capable of adding methods if we want. And so we can do that. We can also override existing things that are in my contact. So we have this public bool check values. So we can override that, or we can even add something else. Okay, so I've retyped this into here. Well, actually, I cut and pasted into here. Now, you'll notice there's a new word here. It says new. If you look at it in the original here, where I cut and paste, you can see that it says public bool whatever, but it doesn't say new. In the My Contact 2, because this is the same name and everything, I had to say new in order for it to tell it to override this. And when I did that, I changed this item so that it was a little bit different, because remember, in My Contact it says response equals false. So in My Contact 2, I changed it so it says response equals true. Okay, so now if I run the form, remember this still says My Contact 2, not My Contact in general here. Okay, so if I start this, okay, and then when I hit submit, it goes directly to submit as finished. Well, why doesn't it come up with that artificial error message that I put in? And the reason is because I selected true instead of false. At this particular spot, it comes back with true, and if not true, then it displays this message. If it's false, then it displays the message. Okay, so this might seem a little backward, but what it means is if it goes into this and converts it to true, okay, so before it came back with a false value, not false is true, so it displays this message. This time it comes back with true, and it says not true, so it skips the message. I could change this if it makes it a little bit clearer. Message box dot show everything is fine. Okay, semicolon. Okay, so true says everything is fine, false says potential error message. Okay, so when I run this again, and it says, see, that message pops up, everything is fine, because I put in true instead of false, and then submit is finished. Okay, so by being able to use classes, we are suddenly able to do an extension, and we don't have to type everything else back in. We can simply say inherit everything that we had before, all of this, plus add on this. Okay, and this is just one of several different changes that object-oriented programming brings to the table. There are several things that we are allowed to do, and it saves us an enormous amount of work. Okay, so I'll bring this video to an end, but you know, I'm going to make this so that you can kind of give this some thought. Have a good evening.